The elevator doors slid open with a soft mechanical hum. Aaliyah Hartwell stepped out slowly, adjusting the strap of her handbag on her shoulder. Her heels tapped gently against the marble floor of the Upper East Side penthouse corridor. Click, click, click. She exhaled quietly. It had been a long flight back from Chicago, longer than expected. Honestly, all she wanted right now was a hot shower, maybe a glass of wine, and about 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Her shoulders loosened slightly as she reached the front door of the penthouse. Home. Finally. She slipped the key into the lock, turning it carefully. The door opened without resistance. "Adrian?" she called softly. No answer. Well, that wasn't unusual. His work hours had become unpredictable lately. Still, something felt off. Aaliyah stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind her. The penthouse lights were dim, casting a warm golden glow across the living room. The city skyline stretched beyond the massive windows, Manhattan alive with its endless rhythm of traffic and distant horns. She set her handbag down on the console table. Her eyes moved slowly across the room. Adrian's jacket rested over the back of the couch. His briefcase sat near the coffee table. So he was home. "Adrian," she called again, a little louder this time. Silence. For a moment she simply stood there, listening. Then, a sound. Soft, distant. A woman's voice. Aaliyah blinked. "Hello?" She tilted her head slightly. Did she hear that correctly? There it was again. A quiet laugh. Light. Familiar. Her stomach tightened just a little. That's strange. Adrian rarely brought guests home without telling her first. Especially this late at night. Maybe it was a colleague. Or someone from the board? Still, something about the tone of that laughter made her pause. It wasn't the polite laughter of a business conversation. No. It was softer, more relaxed, more personal. Aaliyah's steps slowed as she walked deeper into the penthouse. Her heels no longer clicked loudly against the floor. Now they barely made a sound. Step, step, step. Another voice drifted through the hallway. Adrian's. Low, quiet, close, too close. Aaliyah stopped walking. Her chest rose slowly as she inhaled. She looked toward the hallway that led to the bedroom. The door at the end was partially open, and the voices were coming from inside. Now the laughter came again, clearer this time, and the moment Aaliyah recognized the voice, something inside her chest went completely still. Vanessa? The name left her lips as nothing more than a whisper. Her best friend. Aaliyah's fingers curled slightly at her sides. Well, that was unexpected. Vanessa had a key to the penthouse. She had been over countless times. Dinner nights. Wine nights, girls' conversations that stretched past midnight. Still, why would she be here this late? And why was she in the bedroom? Aaliyah took another step toward the hallway. Her heartbeat was steady, not racing, not panicking, just steady, but her mind had already started asking quiet questions. Maybe Adrian had invited her over to talk about something. Maybe Vanessa had stopped by unexpectedly. Maybe. A soft sound cut through her thoughts. A breath. Then Adrian's voice again. Lower now. Almost teasing. Vanessa. Again. Soft. Playful. Adrian. Wait. But this time the laughter faded into something else. A soft breath. Then another sound. Low. Barely controlled. Aaliyah's stomach tightened. Adrian murmured something under his breath. Too low to make out. Then Vanessa again. Not laughter now. A quiet, breathy sound. Almost like she was trying not to be heard. Aaliyah froze. Her hands slowly lifted toward the doorframe. Inside the room, the sounds continued. Soft shifting. A faint gasp. Vanessa's voice again, but now it came out broken by breath. Adrian. The rest dissolved into a quiet moan. Aaliyah's fingers curled slightly against the wood of the doorframe. Her chest rose slowly as she inhaled. For a moment, her mind tried to reject what her ears were clearly telling her. Maybe she misunderstood. Maybe. Another sound cut through the hallway. Vanessa again. This time, unmistakable. A soft cry of pleasure that she clearly wasn't trying very hard to hide. Aaliyah's eyes closed briefly. Vanessa. The name slipped from her lips like a quiet realization. Not loud, not angry. Just certain. Inside the room, Adrian said something again, low, amused, breathless. Vanessa answered with another small moan. The kind of sound that only comes from two people who are standing far too close. Aaliyah stood completely still. Her heartbeat remained steady. Strangely steady. Her hand hovered near the doorframe. She could see part of the room through the narrow opening. Just enough. Enough to understand everything. Her eyes moved slowly. First, to Adrian, then to Vanessa. And for a moment, the world around her seemed to go completely quiet. No traffic. No distant horns. No hum of the city outside. Just those sounds drifting through the doorway. Too intimate. Too familiar. Too wrong. Aaliyah's lips parted slightly. Oh, the word slipped out before she could stop it. Not loud. Just a quiet breath of disbelief. Oh, wow. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the doorframe. Not enough to shake. Not enough to reveal anything. Just enough to ground herself. Inside the room, Adrian said something again. Vanessa laughed softly in response. They hadn't noticed her. Not yet. And strangely, Aaliyah didn't move, didn't push the door open, didn't step inside. She simply stood there, watching, listening, feeling something deep inside her chest shift, not explode, not shatter, just shift, a slow, quiet understanding settling into place. Well, her voice barely rose above a whisper. So this is what loyalty looks like now. Neither of them heard her. Her eyes lingered on the two people in that room. The two people she had trusted more than anyone else in New York. Her husband and her best friend. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then her gaze dropped toward the floor. A long breath left her lungs. The sound was almost thoughtful, almost calm. When she looked up again, her expression had changed. Not angry, not devastated, just still, very still. Aaliyah stepped backward quietly, carefully, slow enough that the floorboards didn't creak. Another step, then another. Her heels made no sound now. She moved down the hallway the same way someone might leave a sleeping room, slowly, silently. Once she reached the living room again, she paused. Her eyes moved toward the large windows overlooking Manhattan. Thousands of lights glittered across the city. For a moment she simply stood there, breathing, thinking. Then a quiet whisper left her lips. Her head tilted slightly. Well, all right. A faint smile touched the corner of her mouth. Not warm, not bitter, just thoughtful. Let's see how this game ends. Aaliyah picked up her handbag from the console table, walked calmly to the door, and left the penthouse without making a sound. The elevator doors closed slowly in front of her. Soft, quiet, almost gentle. Aaliyah stood alone inside the elevator, staring at her reflection in the mirrored wall. For a moment she didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even reach for the button. Her chest rose slowly as she inhaled. Then, exhaled. The sound left her lips before she even realized it. Not anger, not sadness. Her eyes studied her own reflection. Her hair slightly tousled from travel. Her blazer still neatly fitted. Her expression calm, almost too calm. Well, she murmured quietly, that's interesting. The word hung in the air for a second. Interesting, not devastating, not humiliating, just interesting. Her hand finally moved, pressing the lobby button. The elevator began its slow descent. Floor 28, 27, 26. Aaliyah leaned back lightly against the mirrored wall. For a moment her eyes closed, and in the quiet hum of the elevator, the sounds from the bedroom replayed in her mind. Vanessa's voice. Those breathy sounds, Adrian's low murmurs. Aaliyah inhaled again. Slow, controlled. Wow. The whisper barely escaped her lips. Because betrayal is strange like that. People always imagine it as something loud, explosive, tears, shouting, broken glass. But the truth? Sometimes betrayal arrives quietly, like a door left slightly open, like laughter drifting down a hallway, like the sound of someone you trust, making a sound you were never supposed to hear. The elevator continued descending. 22, 21. Aaliyah opened her eyes again. Her reflection stared back at her, unbroken, composed, and right there, in that quiet moment between floors, she understood something important. The two people she trusted most in New York had just destroyed something, not her heart. No, something else, something deeper. Trust. And trust, trust doesn't come back easily once it's broken. The elevator reached the lobby with a soft chime. The doors slid open. Aaliyah stepped out slowly into the marble-floored entrance of the building. The night concierge looked up from the front desk. "Good evening, Mrs. Colthorne." She gave him a polite smile. "Evening." Her voice sounded normal, steady, as if nothing had happened upstairs, as if she hadn't just heard her husband with another woman, as if the woman hadn't been her best friend. Aaliyah stepped outside into the cool Manhattan night. The city air brushed against her skin. Cars passed along the street, headlights gliding across the pavement, life continuing exactly as it always did. Funny, isn't it? The world never pauses just because your reality shifts. Aaliyah stood on the sidewalk for a moment. Her eyes lifted toward the glowing windows of the penthouse high above. Somewhere up there, Adrian and Vanessa were still inside that room, still unaware, still believing their secret remained hidden. Aaliyah exhaled softly. And right here is where I want to ask you something. Because this moment, it's the kind of moment that changes people. Let me ask you honestly. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that their betrayal felt like something inside your chest just quietly cracked, not shattered, not loudly broken, just cracked? Think about that for a second. Because trust is strange. We build it slowly, conversation by conversation, moment by moment, shared secrets, late-night talks, promises whispered when nobody else is listening. And yet, it only takes one moment to destroy it. One hallway, one laugh, one sound behind a half-open door. Now here's the real question. What happens when the two people you trusted most are the ones who betray you? Your husband and your best friend. Most people would react immediately. Anger, confrontation, shouting, tears. But Aaliyah Hartwell? Well, she wasn't most people. Because instead of marching back upstairs, instead of throwing open that bedroom door, instead of screaming their names until the entire building heard her, she did something far more dangerous. She walked away, quietly, calmly, without saying a single word. And the truth? That silence. That silence was the beginning of something neither Adrian nor Vanessa could possibly imagine. Something patient, something calculated, something that would take time. Now let me ask you something else. If you were in Aaliyah's place right now, standing on that Manhattan sidewalk, knowing exactly what was happening upstairs, what would you do? Would you go back and confront them? Would you expose them immediately? Or would you do what Aaliyah chose to do? Would you wait? Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is patient. Now, before we go any further into this story, I want to say something quickly. If you enjoy stories like this, stories about love, betrayal, strength, and the moments that shape our lives, go ahead and tap that like button right now. Yeah, seriously. Because every like tells YouTube to push this story to more people who enjoy powerful storytelling. And while you're here, take a second and drop a comment below. Tell me honestly, if you were Aaliyah, What would you have done in that moment? Would you confront them immediately? Or would you stay quiet and plan something bigger? I read those comments, by the way. And if you're new here, well, welcome to Ms. Wink Stories. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel because stories like this, they're just getting started. Now, let's go back to the beginning, because the truth is, this betrayal didn't start tonight. No, it started long before that hallway, long before the laughter, long before Aaliyah stood outside that bedroom door. In fact, to understand how everything fell apart, we need to go back to the moment these three lives first became connected, back to the beginning, years earlier, long before the Manhattan penthouse, long before the betrayal, long before Aaliyah Hartwell ever heard her husband's voice drifting through a half-open bedroom door. Back when life was simpler. Not easier. No, Chicago had never been easy, but simpler, maybe. The morning air carried the familiar sounds of the South Side waking up, car engines rumbling to life, a bus braking at the corner stop, someone down the street arguing loudly about a missed delivery. Inside Hartwell Beauty Studio, the lights flickered on one by one. The little salon sat on the corner of 79th Street, squeezed between a laundromat and a small bakery that always smelled like cinnamon by mid-morning. It wasn't fancy. The paint on the front door had chipped in a few places. The waiting chairs didn't match, and the old radio near the reception desk sometimes needed a good tap on the side before it worked properly. But the moment the door opened each morning, the shop filled with something warm, something alive, community. Aaliyah pushed the door open that morning, balancing a tray of coffee cups in one hand. Careful, careful. One cup tilted slightly. She steadied it quickly. Ooh, okay. She nudged the door shut with her foot and set the tray down on the front counter. Behind her, the bell above the door gave a cheerful little jingle. Morning already? Her mother's voice drifted from the back room. Aaliyah stretched her shoulders slightly. And I brought coffee. A moment later, her mother stepped out, tying the sash of her salon apron. Her expression softened immediately. Well now, look at that. She picked up one of the cups. You must want something. Aaliyah laughed softly. Wow. So bringing coffee automatically means I want something now? Her mother took a slow sip. She nodded thoughtfully. That's usually how it works. Aaliyah leaned against the counter, watching her. Her mother had owned Hartwell Beauty Studio for almost 3 decades, 27 years to be exact, long enough to watch entire families grow up in those salon chairs. Some customers had first come in as teenagers. Now they arrived with daughters of their own. And through all those years, Aaliyah had grown up right here inside these walls, sweeping floors, answering phones, handing combs and brushes to her mother between appointments. Sometimes she wondered how many conversations she had overheard in this place. Thousands, probably. Maybe more. The salon wasn't just about hair. Oh no. It was where life unfolded. Women talked about everything here. Marriage, divorce, dreams, disappointments. Aaliyah had learned a lot just by listening, sometimes more than she wanted to. Her mother glanced toward the window as the first customer of the day walked past outside. Well, looks like it's going to be busy. Aaliyah nodded. Thursday always is. She picked up the broom resting against the wall and began sweeping the floor near the styling chairs. The soft scratch of the bristles against tile filled the room. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then her mother said quietly, "You're thinking about leaving again, aren't you?" Aaliyah paused. The broom stopped moving. She leaned slightly against the handle. Well, her voice trailed off for a second. Maybe. Her mother didn't react immediately. She simply wiped down one of the mirrors with a cloth. You've been saying maybe for 2 years now. Aaliyah smiled faintly. Yeah, well. She shrugged. Big moves take time. Her mother studied her reflection through the mirror. You thinking about New York again? Aaliyah let out a slow breath. Yeah. The word hung quietly in the room. New York. Just saying it out loud made her chest tighten with equal parts excitement and uncertainty. It felt far away, huge, like stepping into a world that moved faster than anything she had ever known. Her mother finally turned around. Well, She folded the cloth slowly. You always did have big plans. Aaliyah laughed softly. You say that like it's a bad thing. No, baby, her mother said gently. It's not bad. She walked over and leaned lightly against the counter beside her daughter. But big plans come with big risks. Aaliyah nodded. I know. Her voice grew quieter. I don't want to stay in one place forever. Her mother looked around the salon. The chairs, the mirrors, the little radio playing soft music. This place raised you, she said calmly. I know, and it kept food on the table. I know that too. Aaliyah rested her elbows on the counter, staring out the front window. Cars rolled past slowly. People hurried down the sidewalk. Chicago never really stood still, but Aaliyah felt something inside her pushing forward. A quiet voice whispering that life might hold something bigger somewhere else. She tapped her fingers lightly against the counter. Well, her mother glanced sideways at her. That well sounds dangerous. Aaliyah smiled. Maybe a little. There was a pause, a long one. Then her mother said softly, You know what I taught you about life, right? Aaliyah nodded immediately. Self-worth first. Exactly. Her mother's voice carried that same calm firmness it always had. You never chase love before you build your own life. Aaliyah looked down at her hands. Yeah, and you never depend on someone else to rescue you. I remember. Her mother gave a small nod. Good. The bell above the door jingled again as the first customer walked in. Morning, ladies. Aaliyah straightened slightly. Her mother smiled warmly. Morning, Miss Rochelle. Come on in. The salon began filling with voices, conversation, laughter, the rhythm of another normal day starting. But somewhere beneath that familiar routine, Aaliyah felt it again. That quiet pull toward something unknown, something waiting somewhere beyond Chicago, beyond this little salon, beyond the life she had always known. And she had no idea yet that the path she was about to take would eventually lead her all the way to Manhattan, to a man named Adrian Colthorne, and to a future she couldn't possibly imagine. Saturdays in Chicago had a certain energy, not rushed, not quiet either, just alive. Voices drifted across the neighborhood. Music played somewhere down the block. Kids ran past the Hartwell house, shouting about something only they understood. Inside, the kitchen felt warm and crowded. Aaliyah leaned against the counter, watching her aunt argue playfully with one of her cousins. Boy, if you don't put that plate down. I'm hungry. You already ate. Laughter filled the room. Family gatherings always felt like this. Loud, comfortable, familiar. Her mother stepped beside her carrying a dish. You all right over there? Aaliyah nodded. Yeah. Her mother studied her for a moment. You thinking again? That wasn't really a question. Aaliyah smiled faintly. Well, yeah. Her mother set the dish on the table. You still thinking about leaving Chicago? Aaliyah hesitated. Maybe. Her mother crossed her arms. That maybe means yes. Aaliyah laughed quietly. Okay, yeah. I've been thinking about it. There was a pause. Her mother didn't react immediately. She just looked around the room. Family talking, music playing softly. Then she said calmly, Nothing wrong with wanting more for yourself. Aaliyah looked at her. Really? Her mother nodded once. But remember something. Aaliyah already knew what was coming. Self-worth before love. Exactly. Her mother's voice softened. You build your life first. Everything else comes after. Aaliyah breathed out slowly. Yeah, that lesson had followed her for years. And soon enough, life gave her a chance to test it. A few weeks later, Aaliyah found herself sitting in a small downtown conference room at a career networking workshop. Rows of chairs, people quietly introducing themselves, some nervous, some pretending not to be. Aaliyah glanced around the room. She whispered to herself. Well, this is awkward. A voice beside her answered, right? Aaliyah turned. The woman sitting next to her smiled. Confident, stylish, easygoing. I swear half the people here look like they're about to give a presentation, the woman said quietly. Aaliyah laughed. I was thinking the same thing. The woman held out her hand. Vanessa. Aaliyah. They shook hands. Vanessa leaned back in her chair slightly. So, what brings you here? Aaliyah shrugged. Well, I guess I'm trying to figure out what's next. Vanessa tilted her head. Meaning, I don't want to stay stuck doing the same thing forever. Vanessa nodded slowly. I get that. There was something comfortable about the conversation. No pressure, no forced politeness. Just two strangers talking honestly. After the workshop ended, they walked out of the building together. Vanessa glanced at her. You thinking about leaving Chicago someday? Aaliyah blinked. Wait, how did you know that? Vanessa laughed. That look. What look? The I'm meant for something bigger look. Aaliyah shook her head, smiling. Well, maybe. Vanessa grinned. Good. Why? Because I'm thinking the same thing. They stood there for a moment outside the building. Traffic passed along the street. The city moved around them. Vanessa finally said, Well, if we're both trying to figure life out, we might as well stay in touch. Aaliyah nodded. Yeah, she didn't know it yet. But that small moment, that simple conversation outside a workshop in downtown Chicago, was the beginning of a friendship that would follow her through the next stage of her life. Vanessa Clark would eventually become someone Aaliyah trusted deeply, someone she laughed with, someone she confided in, someone who would later walk freely through her Manhattan home. Aaliyah didn't know any of that yet. Right then, it was just two women exchanging numbers on a sunny afternoon. Vanessa smiled as she saved the contact in her phone. Well, guess we're friends now. Aaliyah laughed softly. Looks like it. And neither of them could possibly imagine how important that friendship would become. Aaliyah's days started early. Most mornings she arrived at the beauty studio before the first customer walked through the door. The streets outside still carried that quiet morning calm Chicago sometimes had before the city fully woke up. Inside the salon, the air smelled faintly of hair oil and fresh coffee. Aaliyah placed 2 cups on the counter. Morning. Her mother looked up from organizing brushes. Well, look at you beating me here today. Aaliyah shrugged lightly. Couldn't sleep. Her mother gave her a knowing look. You've been thinking again. Aaliyah leaned against the counter. Yeah. Her mother sipped her coffee slowly. New York? Aaliyah nodded. New York. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The soft hum of the salon lights filled the quiet room. Then her mother said calmly, You know I won't stop you. Aaliyah looked up. Really? Her mother set the cup down. You've been preparing for bigger things since you were a kid. Aaliyah exhaled slowly. Well, I just don't want to fail. Her mother chuckled softly. Baby, everybody fails at something. She stepped closer, placing a hand gently on Aaliyah's shoulder. But independence means you're willing to try anyway. Aaliyah nodded. Those words stayed with her longer than she realized. Over the next year, Aaliyah started pushing herself harder. She took online business courses at night, spent weekends attending professional workshops downtown. Sometimes Vanessa joined her. Sometimes she didn't. But whenever they met afterward, Vanessa always asked the same question. So, when are you finally leaving Chicago? One evening they sat inside a small cafe near the river. Aaliyah stirred her drink slowly. I don't know yet. Vanessa leaned forward slightly. You're waiting for the perfect moment. Aaliyah raised an eyebrow. Is that a bad thing? Vanessa shook her head. No. Then she smiled knowingly. But perfect moments usually don't exist. Aaliyah laughed quietly. Well, that's encouraging. Vanessa shrugged. Hey, I'm just saying. She tapped the table lightly. If you keep waiting for life to feel safe before making big decisions. She paused. You'll still be waiting 10 years from now. Aaliyah stared down at her cup for a moment. That thought sat quietly in her mind. 10 years. Still in the same place. Still wondering what if. Hmm. She exhaled slowly. Okay. Vanessa tilted her head. Okay, what? Aaliyah looked up. I think I'm ready. Vanessa blinked. Wait. Ready for what? Aaliyah smiled. New York. For a second, Vanessa simply stared at her. Then she grinned widely. Well, about time. Aaliyah laughed. Yeah, but beneath that laughter there was something deeper. A quiet sense that her life was finally starting to move forward. Not because someone pushed her, not because she was chasing love, but because she had decided to build something for herself first, just like her mother had always taught her. Self-worth before love. Always. Later that night, Aaliyah stood alone in her bedroom. Her laptop sat open on the desk. The screen displayed something that made her heart beat just a little faster. Job listings, New York City. She stared at the screen for a moment. Well, her voice barely rose above a whisper. This is really happening. She clicked on the first application. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Then she began typing, slowly, carefully, one step at a time, because sometimes independence doesn't arrive with fireworks or dramatic speeches. Sometimes it begins quietly, with a single decision made in a small bedroom in Chicago. A decision that would eventually lead Aaliyah Hartwell to Manhattan, to a powerful CEO named Adrian Colethorne, and to a future she couldn't possibly imagine yet. The idea of New York stayed in Aaliyah's mind for months. Not loud, not dramatic, just there. Some nights she sat at the small desk in her bedroom, scrolling through job listings on her laptop. Consulting firms, financial strategy companies, opportunities that felt far bigger than anything she had known growing up in Chicago. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard one evening. She leaned back in her chair. Are you really about to do this? The thought made her laugh quietly, because leaving Chicago meant leaving everything familiar. The salon, family dinners, her mother's voice calling her from the kitchen. Still, the pull towards something bigger wouldn't go away. So she started applying. One application, then another, then another. Around that time, Aaliyah had briefly dated someone she met through friends. Nothing serious, just dinner a few times. One evening they sat across from each other in a small restaurant downtown. The man studied her curiously. You talk about work a lot. Aaliyah raised an eyebrow. Is that a problem? Well, he shrugged. Some women focus too much on careers. Aaliyah leaned back slowly. My career is part of my life. He smiled awkwardly. Yeah, but eventually people want something stable. Aaliyah understood what he meant immediately. Marriage, settling down, slowing her ambitions. She shook her head slightly. You know what my mother always told me? What? Self-worth before love. The man frowned. So, what does that mean for us? Aaliyah picked up her purse. Honestly, it means I'm building my life first. The relationship ended quietly after that. And strangely, Aaliyah felt even more certain about her path. A few days later, she met Vanessa for coffee. Vanessa sat down across from her, smiling. So, what's new? Aaliyah hesitated for a moment. Well, I applied for a job in New York. Vanessa's eyes widened. Wait, seriously? Aaliyah nodded. Vanessa laughed. Well, about time. Weeks later, an email appeared in Aaliyah's inbox. She opened it slowly. Read the first line. Then blinked. Oh, she leaned closer to the screen. Wow, the consulting firm in Manhattan had offered her the job. That evening she told her mother inside the quiet salon after closing. I got the job. Her mother looked up. New York? Aaliyah nodded. For a moment the room stayed silent. Then her mother hugged her. I'm proud of you. Aaliyah blinked. You're not upset? Her mother smiled softly. No. She stepped back. You're doing exactly what I raised you to do, which is build your own life first. 2 months later, Aaliyah stepped out of a taxi in New York City. Tall buildings surrounded her. The city moved faster than Chicago ever had. Cars, people, noise everywhere. She looked up at the skyline. Well, A small smile appeared on her face. Hello, New York. What she didn't know yet was that somewhere in this massive city lived a man named Adrian Colethorn, a billionaire CEO, a man whose life would soon collide with hers in ways neither of them expected. And years later, that story would lead back to a quiet hallway, a half-open bedroom door, and a betrayal that would change everything. Long before Aaliyah Hartwell stepped into New York City with a single suitcase, another life had already been unfolding there, a very different life. Adrian Colethorn grew up surrounded by a world most people only read about in business magazines. But if you expected that world to be cold or arrogant, well, it wasn't exactly like that, at least not in the beginning. The Colethorn estate sat just outside Manhattan, tucked behind tall iron gates and wide stretches of green land. Inside that home, Adrian's childhood felt surprisingly normal. His father, Edward Colethorn, ran Colethorn Global with the calm confidence of someone who had spent decades building something meaningful. But business wasn't the only thing that mattered to him. Not even close. Edward Colethorn believed wealth came with responsibility. That belief shaped everything about the family. Adrian's mother, Margaret Colethorn, carried that same philosophy. Every year she organized charity events that raised millions for hospitals, schools, and community programs across New York. Sometimes Adrian accompanied her to those events. At first he hated it. Well, most teenagers would. Standing in formal clothes while adults talked about donations and foundations wasn't exactly exciting. But one evening changed how he saw those events. He was 16, standing near the back of a charity ballroom, quietly watching his parents greet guests. A woman approached his mother, tears already in her eyes. Mrs. Colethorn, I just wanted to thank you. His mother gently held the woman's hand. For what? The children's hospital wing you funded. My daughter received treatment there. Her voice trembled slightly. She's alive because of that. Adrian stood there silently, watching the exchange. His mother didn't respond with pride or attention. She simply squeezed the woman's hand gently. I'm glad she's doing well. That was it. No speeches, no spotlight, just quiet kindness. Later that night, Adrian asked his father about it. Why do you both give away so much money? His father smiled thoughtfully. Because success means very little if it only benefits you. Adrian never forgot that answer. Those lessons followed him into adulthood. Even later, after everything changed. Adrian was 23 when the phone call came. He still remembered the moment clearly. He had been inside his apartment in Manhattan, reviewing financial reports from one of the company's European divisions. His phone rang. An unfamiliar number. Hello? There was a pause on the other end, then a voice. Serious. Careful. Mr. Colethorn, I'm afraid there's been an accident. Adrian sat up slightly. What kind of accident? Another pause. A quiet inhale. Your parents' plane lost contact shortly after leaving Boston. Adrian blinked. Lost contact? Yes. For a moment his mind refused to process the words. Planes didn't just disappear. Not like that. He leaned forward slowly. So they'll land somewhere else, right? Silence answered him. And in that silence, something cold settled in his chest. The search lasted 2 days. By the third morning, the news confirmed what everyone already feared. The aircraft had gone down in the Atlantic. There were no survivors. Adrian sat in his office staring at the report when the confirmation arrived. He didn't cry, didn't shout, didn't react at all for several minutes. Well, the words slipped out quietly, almost like a breath leaving his lungs. That's... His voice faded, because grief sometimes arrives quietly, not dramatic, just heavy, like a weight settling somewhere deep inside your chest. And from that moment forward, Adrian Colethorn's life would never look the same again. The funeral drew thousands of people, business leaders, politicians, employees from every division of Colethorn Global. The company his father built had grown into one of the most influential logistics corporations in the country. Ships, air freight, international supply routes, everything moved through Colethorn Global. And now, That entire empire suddenly belonged to Adrian, 23 years old, standing at the front of a boardroom filled with executives twice his age. The board chairman cleared his throat gently. "Mr. Cawthorn, the company bylaws confirm that ownership transfers to you." Adrian nodded slowly. "Right." His voice sounded steady, but inside his mind, everything still felt unreal. He looked around the table. Rows of experienced executives watched him carefully, some supportive, some skeptical. One board member finally asked the question everyone was thinking. "Do you intend to take control of the company yourself?" Adrian leaned back slightly in his chair. For a moment he said nothing. Then he exhaled quietly. Well, if my father trusted me with it." He paused. "I'll learn," and that was exactly what he did. Long days, longer nights. Adrian buried himself in work, studying contracts, meeting investors, learning every part of the company his parents had built. Slowly, the uncertainty faded, and something else took its place. Discipline, focus, control. Over the years, Adrian Cawthorn became known for something very specific in the business world: control. He ran meetings with precision, made decisions quickly, and rarely allowed emotions to interfere with business. Some people described him as distant, others called him intimidating. But those who worked closely with him understood something different. Adrian wasn't cold, not really. He was careful. Grief had taught him something most people learn much later in life. When you lose the people you love, suddenly, you begin protecting your heart without even realizing it. Adrian still honored his parents' values. Cawthorn Global continued funding the same charities his mother once supported: hospitals, education programs, community initiatives. But personally, Adrian kept his life structured. Work came first. Everything else stayed at a distance. Relationships, romance, emotional risks. Those things felt complicated, unpredictable, and Adrian Cawthorn preferred things he could control. What he didn't realize yet was that somewhere in Manhattan, a woman named Aaliyah Hartwell had just begun building her own life. A woman whose strength and independence would eventually challenge everything Adrian thought he understood about trust, love, and vulnerability. But that meeting, that moment when their worlds finally crossed, that was still ahead. And when it happened, neither of them would be prepared for how deeply their lives would become connected. Manhattan moved fast, faster than Chicago ever had. Cars honked. People rushed past each other with coffee cups in hand. And towering above the busy street stood the sleek glass building that housed Cawthorn Global headquarters. Aaliyah stood across the street for a moment, looking up at it. She adjusted the strap of her work bag on her shoulder. "Well," her voice was quiet but steady, "guess this is it." The company she worked for had assigned her team to consult on a major logistics restructuring project for Cawthorn Global. For Aaliyah, it was the biggest assignment she had received since moving to New York, and today would be the first time presenting their strategy directly to the executive leadership, including the CEO, Adrian Cawthorn. She inhaled slowly. "Okay," then crossed the street. Inside the building, the lobby gleamed with polished marble floors and tall glass walls that overlooked the city. Aaliyah approached the security desk. "Good morning." The guard glanced at her badge. "Consulting team?" "Yes." He nodded toward the elevators. 37th floor. Aaliyah stepped inside the elevator a moment later. As the doors closed, she caught her reflection in the mirrored panel. Professional suit, calm expression, but inside, her mind ran through every detail of the presentation. "Well," she exhaled slowly. "Let's hope they like the numbers." The elevator chimed, 37th floor, and with that quiet sound, Aaliyah stepped into the moment that would eventually connect her life to Adrian Cawthorn's. The boardroom was already filling with executives when Aaliyah entered. A long glass table stretched across the room. Large digital screens lined one wall. Several senior executives were already seated. Others stood near the windows discussing reports. Aaliyah placed her tablet on the table and opened her presentation file. Her colleague leaned toward her quietly. CEO's joining us today. Aaliyah nodded. Figured. The room grew quieter a few minutes later. The door opened. Adrian Colethorne stepped inside. Tall, composed, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit. Conversations stopped almost instantly. Aaliyah glanced up briefly, then looked back down at her tablet. But in that brief moment, she noticed something about him. He carried himself differently. Not loud, not dramatic, just controlled. Adrian took his seat at the head of the table. His gaze moved across the room slowly, assessing everyone present. Then it stopped. On Aaliyah. Just for a second. The sound was almost inaudible. He flipped open the report in front of him. Let's begin. Aaliyah stepped forward once the presentation started. The screen behind her displayed the first set of financial projections. She spoke clearly, confidently. Our analysis indicates that restructuring the company's eastern shipping routes could increase operational efficiency by approximately 16%. One executive frowned slightly. 16% seems optimistic. Aaliyah nodded. It would be, if the current distribution structure remained unchanged. She tapped the screen. But it doesn't have to. Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying her. Go on, Aaliyah continued. Our proposal shifts 2 key logistics hubs closer to primary shipping ports. That reduces transit delays and operating costs simultaneously. Another executive spoke up. That would require major infrastructure adjustments. Yes, Aaliyah said calmly. It would. The room fell quiet. Adrian's fingers tapped lightly against the table. Continue. She did, walking through the strategy step by step. Each slide revealed deeper analysis, more precise numbers, more confident projections. The room slowly shifted from skepticism to curiosity. About halfway through the presentation, Adrian finally interrupted. Miss, he glanced at the report briefly. Hartwell. Aaliyah met his gaze. Yes. Adrian tilted his head slightly. You're suggesting a complete structural shift in our freight distribution. Yes. You realize that involves millions in capital investment. Aaliyah nodded. I do. The room watched quietly. Adrian studied her expression. And you're confident it will work? Aaliyah didn't hesitate. Yes. The certainty in her voice caught his attention. He leaned back slightly. Interesting. There was a pause. Then Adrian asked another question. And what makes you so confident our current leadership overlooked something this significant? The room shifted uncomfortably, but Aaliyah didn't retreat. She simply said, well, she gestured toward the screen behind her. You've been looking at the company from the inside. A brief pause. Our job is to analyze it from the outside. Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. Then, a faint smile appeared. The meeting ended nearly an hour later. Executives slowly gathered their reports and stood from the table. Aaliyah packed her tablet into her bag. As she turned toward the door, Adrian's voice stopped her. Miss Hartwell. She looked back. Yes. Adrian walked toward her slowly. The room had mostly emptied now. Just the two of them, and a few lingering executives. You're new to this firm. Aaliyah nodded. Yes. And you're already presenting structural changes to a multi-billion-dollar company. That's the job. Adrian studied her for a moment. You're either very confident, he paused, or very brave. Aaliyah met his gaze calmly. Well, maybe both. That answer made him chuckle quietly. For the first time during the meeting, Adrian extended his hand. Adrian Colethorne. Aaliyah shook it. Aaliyah Hartwell. The handshake lasted only a second, but something about that moment lingered. A quiet spark neither of them fully understood yet. Adrian released her hand. I look forward to seeing how your proposal develops. Aaliyah nodded once. You will. Then she walked out of the boardroom, leaving Adrian standing there watching the door for a moment longer than he intended. He tapped the report against the table thoughtfully. Because for the first time in a long while, someone had walked into his company, challenged his assumptions, and refused to be intimidated, and Adrian Cawthorn found that unexpectedly interesting. The weeks after that first boardroom meeting passed quickly. Cawthorn Global's restructuring project moved into its most demanding phase, and that meant long hours for everyone involved, especially Aaliyah. One evening she sat alone in a conference room on the 37th floor, reviewing logistics charts on her laptop. Outside the windows, Manhattan glowed with thousands of lights. It was already past 9. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing the bridge of her nose. All right, one more pass through the numbers. The door behind her opened quietly. Aaliyah looked up. Adrian Cawthorn stepped into the room holding a tablet. She blinked slightly. Oh, I didn't realize anyone else was still here. Adrian closed the door behind him. Well, neither did I. He walked toward the table, glancing at the charts on her screen. You're still reviewing the Eastern freight projections. Aaliyah nodded. They don't balance yet. Adrian pulled out a chair across from her. Mind if I take a look? She gestured toward the screen. Go ahead. For the next several minutes they spoke only about the project. Routes, shipping costs, transit timing. The conversation moved quickly, focused, professional. But something about working side by side changed the atmosphere slightly. The boardroom had been formal, guarded. This room felt quieter, more personal. Adrian leaned closer to the screen. You're right. About what? This adjustment. He pointed to a column of numbers. If we shift the New Jersey hub instead of Brooklyn. Aaliyah nodded immediately. That cuts delivery time by 12 hours. Adrian looked at her. You already calculated that. She smiled faintly. Yeah. For a moment they simply studied each other across the table. Then Adrian cleared his throat slightly. Well, that's impressive. Aaliyah shrugged lightly. It's just numbers. But Adrian didn't look convinced. No. To him, it was something else. Focus, precision, confidence. And he found himself noticing her more often after that. Especially during those late-night meetings when the building grew quiet and conversations became less formal. A few nights later, another meeting stretched long past the end of the workday. By the time they finished reviewing reports, the rest of the office had already gone home. Aaliyah closed her laptop with a soft click. Well, that's enough numbers for tonight. Adrian stood near the window looking down at the city. You don't seem tired. Oh, I'm tired, she replied. But if I stare at spreadsheets any longer, I might fall asleep on the keyboard. Adrian chuckled quietly. Fair. He glanced toward the door. Come on. Where? The rooftop. Aaliyah raised an eyebrow. The building has a rooftop? You've been working here for weeks and didn't know that? Well, no. He gestured toward the hallway. Follow me. A few minutes later, they stepped outside onto the rooftop terrace. The night air felt cooler up there. Manhattan stretched in every direction. Lights, traffic, energy everywhere. Aaliyah walked to the edge of the railing. Wow. Yeah, Adrian said softly. It's different from street level. She nodded slowly. I moved here from Chicago. I know. You do? Adrian shrugged slightly. I read your professional profile after the first meeting. Aaliyah laughed. That's a little intimidating. Well, your presentation was memorable. They stood side by side in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Aaliyah spoke quietly. Do you ever stop working? Adrian tilted his head slightly. Sometimes, but not often. Why? He thought about the question before answering. Habit. Aaliyah glanced at him. Or avoidance. That made him pause. Maybe both. For the first time, their conversation wasn't about business, and Adrian realized something surprising. Talking to Aaliyah felt easy. Several days later, another long meeting ended just before sunset. Aaliyah packed her notes into her bag. Adrian glanced toward the window. Still early. For New York, maybe. He stood. Walk with me. Where? Central Park. Aaliyah hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. Well, okay. The park looked peaceful compared to the busy streets outside. Trees swayed gently in the evening breeze. People walked dogs. Couples sat on benches. Aaliyah slipped her hands into her coat pockets. "You come here often?" Adrian nodded. "Sometimes, thinking time." Something like that. They walked slowly along the path. A comfortable silence settled between them. Not awkward, just thoughtful. Finally, Aaliyah said, "You know something?" "What?" "You're different from what I expected." Adrian glanced at her. "How so?" "Well," she smiled slightly, "you're a billionaire CEO. That's the rumor. I assumed you'd be more—" She searched for the word. "Intense." Adrian laughed quietly. "Give it time." They eventually stopped near a quiet bench overlooking the lake. Aaliyah sat down first. Adrian remained standing for a moment before joining her. The city noise felt distant here. Aaliyah looked out across the water. "You ever think about slowing down?" Adrian followed her gaze. "Not really." "Why?" He hesitated. My parents built everything I run now." Aaliyah looked at him. "They passed away when I was 23. Her expression softened immediately. "I'm sorry." Adrian nodded slightly. "Plane crash." The words came out calm, but something in his voice shifted. "After that," he paused. "Well, there wasn't much time to slow down." Aaliyah watched him quietly. For the first time she saw something beneath his controlled exterior. Not arrogance, not coldness. Just someone carrying weight. She said softly, "That must have been hard." Adrian shrugged. "You learned to keep moving." Aaliyah nodded slowly. "Yeah, but the moment lingered between them." And Adrian realized something unusual. He rarely talked about his parents. Yet somehow, talking to Aaliyah didn't feel uncomfortable. As they stood to leave the bench, Aaliyah slipped slightly on the gravel path. "Whoa." Adrian instinctively reached out. His hand caught hers. For a moment, they both froze. Her fingers rested lightly in his. Warm, soft. Neither moved immediately. Aaliyah looked up. Their eyes met, and something about that moment felt unexpectedly intense. Not dramatic, not rushed, just close, very close. Aaliyah laughed softly. "Thanks." Adrian released her hand slowly. "Of course." But the feeling lingered. The warmth, the eye contact, the quiet awareness between them. And as they continued walking through the park, Adrian noticed something strange happening inside him. Something he hadn't felt in years. Curiosity, interest, something deeper beginning to form. Over the next several weeks, their interactions became more frequent. Meetings, conversations, occasional walks after work. Nothing dramatic, nothing rushed. But each moment added something new. Adrian began noticing small details. The way Aaliyah challenged his assumptions during discussions. The way she refused to be intimidated by his position. The quiet confidence she carried into every room. One evening after another meeting ended, Adrian watched her gather her files. What?" He shook his head slightly. "Nothing." "You're staring." "Am I?" "Yes." Adrian smiled faintly. "Well, I was thinking." "About what?" "That hiring your consulting firm may have been one of our better decisions." Aaliyah laughed. "Careful. Compliments like that might go to my head." Adrian leaned slightly against the table. "I doubt that." She glanced at him briefly, and for a moment the air between them felt different. Warmer, more personal. Adrian didn't say it out loud, but somewhere inside he already understood something. He was beginning to fall for her. Slowly, unexpectedly, and maybe a little dangerously. "Now let me ask you something." Think about this for a second. If you were in Aaliyah's place right now, would you trust a billionaire CEO with your heart, or would you keep things strictly professional? Go ahead and drop your answer in the comments. Because sometimes the most unexpected connections can change everything. And Aaliyah Hartwell was about to learn that lesson in ways she never imagined. The invitation came unexpectedly, late one Thursday afternoon, after a long strategy meeting. Aaliyah gathered her files while Adrian remained seated at the end of the conference table, watching her quietly. What? She asked, noticing the look. Adrian leaned back slightly. I'm going to the Hamptons this weekend. Aaliyah raised an eyebrow. Okay, that wasn't the interesting part. Oh, the interesting part, Adrian said calmly, is that I was about to ask if you'd like to come. She blinked. The Hamptons? He nodded once. Just a quiet weekend. Aaliyah studied his face carefully. You invite all your consultants to vacation houses? Adrian chuckled softly. Well, no. The answer lingered between them. Aaliyah crossed her arms lightly. That sounds suspiciously like a date. Adrian tilted his head. Does that bother you? She hesitated, then smiled. No, the Hamptons looked nothing like Manhattan. Open skies, ocean air, quiet roads lined with tall trees. Adrian's beach house sat near the water, elegant but peaceful. Aaliyah stepped onto the back deck and inhaled deeply. Wow. Adrian leaned against the railing beside her. You like it? It's calm. He nodded. That's why I come here. For a moment, neither spoke. The ocean moved slowly beyond the horizon, and Aaliyah realized something surprising. Being here with Adrian didn't feel complicated. It felt easy. That evening, they sat on the outdoor terrace as the sun slowly disappeared over the water. Soft lights glowed along the deck. Aaliyah twirled the stem of her wine glass thoughtfully. You cook? Adrian glanced at the empty plates. Well, I attempted to. She laughed quietly. It was good. Good is a very diplomatic word. Aaliyah smiled. All right. It was impressive. Adrian leaned back in his chair. I'll take impressive. The conversation slowed after that. Not awkward, just softer, more personal. Aaliyah studied him across the table. You're different here. How so? Less guarded. Adrian considered that. Maybe. The ocean breeze moved gently around them. Aaliyah's hair shifted slightly in the wind. Adrian watched her for a moment longer than he meant to, and she noticed. You're staring again. Am I? Yes. He smiled faintly. Well, maybe I'm starting to understand why I keep inviting you places. The words hung between them. Warm, unspoken, but very clear. Later that night, music played softly inside the beach house. Nothing loud, just a quiet melody drifting through the room. Aaliyah stood near the window, watching the ocean in the distance. Adrian stepped closer. Dance with me. She laughed. There's no dance floor. There's a living room. She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. All right. They moved slowly, not formally, just two people swaying gently to quiet music. Adrian's hand rested lightly at her waist. Aaliyah's fingers curled softly around his shoulder. The space between them felt smaller with each step. Closer, warmer. Adrian leaned slightly closer. His voice lowered. You're thinking about something. Maybe. What? Aaliyah's eyes lifted toward his. This feels dangerous. He smiled faintly. Why? Because I'm starting to like you. Adrian's hand tightened slightly at her waist. Good. The next morning they walked along the beach. Barefoot, the sand cool beneath their feet. Aaliyah looked out across the water. You ever worry about letting people get too close? Adrian paused beside her. Sometimes. That's honest. Well. He exhaled slowly. Losing my parents taught me something. What? That the people you care about the most can disappear without warning. Aaliyah's expression softened. Yeah, I think that's why I work so much. She nodded quietly. Protecting yourself. Something like that. Aaliyah studied him for a moment. You know what protects me? What? My independence. She smiled gently. My mother always said self-worth comes first. Adrian looked at her thoughtfully. I like that. And in that moment something shifted between them. Not just attraction. Trust. Months passed. The project ended successfully. But Adrian and Aaliyah kept seeing each other. Dinners, walks, late conversations that stretched long past midnight. One evening they stood in Adrian's Manhattan penthouse kitchen. Aaliyah leaned against the counter, sipping tea. You know something? What? You never actually asked me to be your girlfriend. Adrian looked up from the glass he was holding. You're right. So, what exactly are we? Adrian considered the question for a moment, then said casually, well, maybe we should get married. Aaliyah stared at him. Wait, you're joking? No. You're serious? Adrian nodded calmly. Yes. Aaliyah laughed in disbelief. You can't propose like that. Why not? Because proposals are supposed to be dramatic. Adrian stepped closer. I prefer honest. Aaliyah studied his face, the quiet certainty in his eyes. You really mean it? Yes. She exhaled slowly, then smiled. Well, okay. The wedding happened a few months later. Elegant, intimate. Friends and colleagues gathered to celebrate the union between Aaliyah Hartwell and Adrian Colethorne. To the outside world, it looked like the beginning of a beautiful love story. A brilliant woman, a powerful CEO, two ambitious lives coming together. And for a while, it truly felt like that. Love, partnership, a future full of possibility, which made what happened later all the more devastating. Married life settled into a rhythm faster than Aaliyah expected. The penthouse overlooking Manhattan became their shared space. Morning coffee near the window, late dinners after long workdays, quiet conversations that sometimes stretched late into the night. Some evenings felt almost peaceful. Almost. One Friday night, Aaliyah stood in the kitchen arranging glasses on the counter. Music played softly in the background. Adrian leaned against the island watching her. What? She asked without looking up. You're reorganizing the glasses again. Aaliyah laughed quietly. Well, your cabinet system makes no sense. Before Adrian could reply, the doorbell rang. Aaliyah smiled immediately. That's probably Vanessa. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Your famous best friend. She walked to the door and opened it. Vanessa Clark stepped inside with the same bright energy Aaliyah remembered from Chicago. Aaliyah. They hugged warmly. Vanessa pulled back, looking around the penthouse. Wow, you weren't exaggerating. Aaliyah laughed. Well, Adrian's taste is a little dramatic. Adrian stepped forward from the living room. Vanessa Clark, I assume. Vanessa smiled easily. And you must be the billionaire husband. Adrian chuckled. That's one way to introduce me. Vanessa extended her hand confidently. Nice to finally meet you. Adrian shook it briefly. Likewise. The three of them moved into the living room together. Conversation flowed naturally. Stories from Chicago, work updates, teasing jokes about how serious Adrian looked during board meetings. Vanessa leaned back comfortably on the couch. You know, she said, glancing between them, when Aaliyah first told me about you, I didn't believe it. Adrian tilted his head. Oh? She said she met this powerful CEO who kept challenging her during meetings. Aaliyah rolled her eyes. Don't exaggerate. Vanessa grinned. I'm not exaggerating. She lifted her glass slightly. I just didn't expect you two to actually fall in love. Adrian looked toward Aaliyah. Neither did we. The room filled with quiet laughter, and on the surface, everything felt normal. Vanessa visited often after that. Dinner nights, weekend drinks, casual conversations in the penthouse living room. To anyone watching from the outside, she looked like exactly what she claimed to be. A loyal friend, supportive, happy for Aaliyah's new life. But sometimes, small moments lingered a little longer than they should have. Moments most people might overlook, except Aaliyah didn't notice them. Not yet. One evening, a few weeks later, Vanessa arrived again for dinner. Aaliyah greeted her at the door with a quick hug. You're early. Well, Vanessa shrugged playfully. Free food motivates punctuality. Adrian was in the kitchen preparing drinks. Vanessa walked toward him. So the rumors are true. Adrian glanced up. What rumors? That you actually cook. He smiled faintly. Only when I'm trying to impress someone. Vanessa laughed softly. I see. Aaliyah joined them moments later. The three sat together at the dining table as the evening moved comfortably forward. Conversation flowed easily, but at one point, Vanessa watched Adrian a little longer than necessary. Aaliyah noticed, just briefly. What? Vanessa asked quickly. Nothing. You made a face. Aaliyah shrugged. Well, I was just wondering something. What? How are you still single? Vanessa laughed. Oh, please. Her tone sounded light, but her eyes flickered briefly toward Adrian. Men in New York are exhausting. Adrian chuckled quietly. That's unfortunate for the rest of us. Vanessa leaned her elbow on the table. Well, maybe I just haven't met the right one. Her voice trailed slightly as she glanced at him again. Then she quickly looked back at Aaliyah. But enough about me. She lifted her glass. To my best friend marrying a billionaire. Aaliyah laughed and clinked glasses with her. But the moment lingered just a little longer than it should have. Over the next few weeks, those tiny moments happened again. Nothing obvious. Nothing dramatic. Just small things. A lingering look. A slightly longer laugh at Adrian's jokes. A quiet pause when he entered a room. Adrian didn't seem to notice, and Aaliyah trusted Vanessa too deeply to question it. But for anyone watching carefully, the dynamic between the three of them had begun to shift. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. And that shift would eventually lead to the moment Aaliyah would later remember with painful clarity. Standing outside her bedroom door, hearing those sounds inside the room, whispering one name in disbelief. Vanessa. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Aaliyah stepped into the quiet hallway of the penthouse floor, her heels tapping gently against the polished marble. Click, click, click. It had been a long day, long meetings, long conversations, and an earlier flight back into New York than Adrian expected. She rolled her shoulders slightly, adjusting the strap of her bag. Finally home. The hallway remained silent except for the faint hum of the building's lights. Aaliyah reached the door of the penthouse and slipped the key into the lock. The door opened smoothly. Inside, the lights were dim. Soft music drifted faintly from somewhere deeper in the apartment. She paused. Adrian? No answer. Aaliyah stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind her. Her eyes moved across the living room. Adrian's jacket rested casually across the back of a chair. 2 wine glasses sat on the kitchen counter. She frowned slightly. Vanessa must be here. That wasn't unusual. Vanessa had become a frequent visitor over the past months. Dinner, drinks, casual evenings talking about life. Aaliyah slipped off her heels and walked deeper into the penthouse. Adrian, still no answer. Then, laughter. A soft woman's laugh drifted down the hallway. Aaliyah froze. Her stomach tightened almost instantly. Because she recognized that voice. Vanessa? She took another slow step toward the hallway. Another sound followed. Not laughter this time. A breath. Soft, uneven. Aaliyah's fingers curled slightly at her side. Something inside her chest shifted. That quiet instinct people get when they suddenly understand more than they want to. The bedroom door at the end of the hallway stood slightly open. Just enough for sound to slip through. Aaliyah walked closer. Slowly, carefully. Her heartbeat remained steady, but her mind had already begun putting the pieces together. Inside the room, another breath. Then Vanessa again. Adrian, wait. The rest dissolved into a soft, breathy sound. Aaliyah stopped moving. Her hand lifted slowly to the doorframe. And she looked inside. Through the narrow opening of the door, Aaliyah saw them. Adrian, Vanessa. Too close. Bodies tangled in a moment that clearly wasn't innocent. The room smelled faintly of perfume and wine. Vanessa's hair spilled across the pillow. Adrian leaned over her, whispering something that made her laugh softly. Not the polite laugh of conversation, no. This one was slower, warmer, more intimate. Vanessa's hand slid along Adrian's shoulder. The quiet sound escaped her before she could stop it. Adrian's voice answered in a low murmur. Aaliyah stood perfectly still in the hallway. Her fingers tightened against the doorframe. For a moment the world seemed to go completely silent, not because the sounds inside the room stopped, but because something inside her mind simply froze. Oh, the words slipped out quietly, almost like a breath. Oh, wow. Neither of them heard her. Vanessa shifted slightly beneath Adrian. Another breath, another soft sound, the kind that should never echo through a home built on trust. Aaliyah closed her eyes briefly, just for a second, because the scene in front of her didn't feel real. Her husband, her best friend, the two people she trusted most in this city, together, in the one room that was supposed to belong to her marriage. Aaliyah inhaled slowly, then exhaled. Her voice came out almost thoughtful. So, this is how it ends. But she didn't push the door open, didn't shout, didn't confront them. Instead, something unexpected happened, something that shocked even herself. She stepped backward. Slowly, quietly. Her heels made no sound against the floor. Another laugh escaped Vanessa inside the room. Adrian whispered something in response. Aaliyah turned away from the door and walked back down the hallway. The living room felt strangely calm when she returned. The same city lights glowed through the tall windows. Traffic moved far below the building, life continuing exactly as it always did. Aaliyah stood in the center of the room for a moment, breathing, thinking. Her eyes drifted toward the two wine glasses on the counter, one with a faint lipstick mark, Vanessa's shade. Of course, Aaliyah picked up her handbag. Her movements remained slow, controlled. Then she walked toward the door. Before leaving, she glanced once more toward the hallway, toward the bedroom. The sounds from inside the room were still faintly audible. Soft laughter, low whispers. Aaliyah shook her head slightly. Wow. She opened the door, stepped into the hallway, and left without making a single sound. No confrontation, no tears, no accusations, just silence. And sometimes, silence is far more dangerous than anger, because the woman who walked out of that penthouse that night was no longer the same woman who walked in. Something had changed, something calm, something patient, something that would take time. Now let me ask you something. Think about it for a second. If you were in Aaliyah's place right then, standing outside that bedroom door, hearing those sounds, seeing the two people you trusted most betray you, would you confront them immediately? Or would you stay quiet and plan something bigger? Go ahead and tell me in the comments. Because Aaliyah Hartwell, well, she chose the second option. And neither Adrian nor Vanessa had any idea what was coming next. The next morning felt almost unreal. Sunlight poured through the tall windows of the penthouse living room, casting long reflections across the marble floor. Aaliyah stood in the kitchen, quietly stirring her coffee. The smell of fresh espresso filled the air. Behind her, Adrian walked into the room, adjusting his watch. Morning. Aaliyah glanced over her shoulder. Morning. Her voice sounded normal. Calm, almost relaxed. Adrian poured himself coffee. You got back earlier than expected yesterday. Aaliyah lifted the cup to her lips. Flight changed. Adrian nodded slightly. Sorry I missed you. Aaliyah leaned against the counter, watching him for a moment. Well, I assumed you were busy. Her tone remained soft, controlled, not a single hint of accusation. Adrian looked relieved. Yeah. Late meeting. Aaliyah nodded once. Of course. Inside her mind, the image from the night before flickered briefly. Vanessa's voice. Adrian's whisper. But her expression never changed. Not even slightly. because something had shifted inside her. A new kind of calm, cold, focused. For the rest of the morning, she behaved exactly the same as always. Light conversation, casual smiles, even a quick kiss on Adrian's cheek before leaving for work. And Adrian never suspected a thing, not even when she paused at the door and looked back at him. "Have a good day." Her voice carried a quiet warmth. But inside her mind, another thought formed slowly. This game isn't over. Aaliyah returned to her consulting office later that afternoon. Her colleagues discussed normal project updates, financial forecasts, market adjustments, but Aaliyah's attention had shifted. Completely. Late that evening, she sat alone at her desk reviewing documents on her laptop. Cawthorn Global Financial Reports, board meeting summaries, shareholder structures. She leaned closer to the screen. So this is how it works. Before meeting Adrian, she had studied the company only from a consulting perspective. Now she studied it differently, more personally, more carefully. Cawthorn Global was massive. International shipping networks, logistics hubs across 3 continents. But, like every large corporation, power didn't live in just one place. It lived in relationships. Shareholders, investors, board influence. Aaliyah tapped her pen lightly against the desk. Well, if someone wanted leverage, she paused. This is where they'd start. Her fingers moved across the keyboard again, opening another report, and another. By midnight, the office floor had emptied. But Aaliyah remained at her desk, quiet, focused, learning the architecture of Adrian's empire. Not because she wanted to destroy it, no, because she wanted to understand it. Every piece, every weakness, every opportunity. And the more she studied, the calmer she became. Weeks passed. Life in the penthouse continued normally on the surface. Dinner conversations, occasional visits from Vanessa, work updates. Adrian never noticed anything unusual. But outside that apartment, Aaliyah began moving differently, strategically. One afternoon, she sat across from an older investor at a private midtown restaurant. The man reviewed a financial document she had prepared. This is impressive analysis. Aaliyah smiled slightly. Cawthorn Global has enormous potential. The investor nodded. Yes, but the board tends to move cautiously. Aaliyah leaned forward slightly. Sometimes companies need new perspectives. The man studied her carefully. You're very confident. Well, I prefer to be prepared. Over the next several weeks, meetings like this happened again. Private conversations, strategic introductions. Investors who already respected Aaliyah's analytical skills began listening to her ideas. And slowly, influence began shifting. Not dramatically, just enough. One evening after another meeting, Aaliyah stood outside a Manhattan restaurant watching the traffic pass. She exhaled slowly, step by step, because revenge wasn't about rage, not for her. It was about patience. Months passed, and something about Aaliyah changed, not visibly. She still smiled at dinner, still attended events with Adrian, still greeted Vanessa warmly when she visited the penthouse. But inside, she had become something else entirely. Calmer, sharper, more deliberate. One evening, Adrian stood behind her on the balcony overlooking Manhattan. You've been working a lot lately. Aaliyah rested her hands lightly on the railing. Have I? Yes. He stepped closer. Something on your mind? Aaliyah turned slightly toward him. The city lights reflected in her eyes. Just thinking about the future. Adrian smiled faintly. That sounds serious. Well, she shrugged lightly. I've always liked planning ahead. Adrian wrapped an arm loosely around her waist. You're mysterious sometimes. Aaliyah looked up at him. Am I? Yes. He studied her face. But I like it. Aaliyah smiled softly. But her thoughts moved elsewhere. To the investors she had met. To the board members beginning to listen to her insights, to the slow shift of influence she was carefully building. Because the woman Adrian believed he understood, The woman he believed trusted him completely was already several moves ahead, and the night she walked away from that bedroom door, that was only the beginning. Adrian noticed it first on a quiet evening in the penthouse. The city lights stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls, glowing across the Manhattan skyline. Aaliyah stood near the window, scrolling slowly through something on her tablet. Adrian leaned against the kitchen counter, watching her. What? Aaliyah asked without looking up. You've been doing that a lot lately. Doing what? Thinking, she smiled faintly. Well, thinking isn't illegal yet. Adrian chuckled softly. No. He walked toward her. But it usually comes with a conversation. Aaliyah finally looked up. Does it? Usually. She set the tablet down on the table. For a moment they stood facing each other in the soft light of the room. Adrian reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. You've been distant. Her eyes flickered briefly. Have I? Yes. His voice stayed calm, not dramatically. He paused. Just enough for me to notice. Aaliyah studied his face quietly. Then she stepped slightly closer, resting her hands lightly against his chest. Well, maybe I've just been busy. Adrian searched her expression for a moment longer. But whatever he expected to find there, he didn't. Because Aaliyah's smile looked exactly the same as always. Warm, calm, unbothered. And that somehow made the feeling inside his chest even stranger. Later that week they attended a corporate gala together. The ballroom glittered with crystal lights and quiet conversations. Executives moved through the room with drinks in hand. Aaliyah stood beside Adrian, wearing a deep midnight blue dress that caught the light with every movement. Adrian glanced toward her again. You're staring. She didn't even look at him when she said it. I know. Aaliyah finally turned her head slightly. Well, stop. Not possible. That made her laugh softly. The sound lingered between them. Adrian leaned closer. His voice lowered near her ear. You still have that effect. What effect? The one where I forget whatever conversation I was having. Aaliyah raised an eyebrow. That sounds inconvenient. Very. She turned toward him fully now. For a moment the noise of the room faded slightly. The tension between them still existed. That quiet spark that had always drawn them together. Aaliyah lifted her glass. Careful. Why? You're starting to flirt with your own wife. Adrian smiled slowly. I never stopped. Her lips curved slightly at the corner. And for a moment, just a moment, the distance between them seemed to disappear. But Adrian noticed something else too. Even when she smiled, there was a calmness in her eyes he didn't quite recognize. Later that night they returned to the penthouse. The city outside had grown quieter. Aaliyah slipped off her heels near the door. Adrian loosened his tie, watching her cross the room. Aaliyah. She paused slightly. Yes? He hesitated, not something Adrian Colthorne usually did. Can I ask you something? She turned slowly. You just did. Adrian exhaled quietly. Have I done something? The question lingered between them. Aaliyah studied him carefully. What makes you ask that? I don't know. He ran a hand across the back of his neck. You feel different. A small silence passed. Then Aaliyah walked toward him again, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence. Her fingers brushed lightly against his collar. Well, she adjusted the fabric slowly. If you had done something wrong. She paused. Don't you think I would tell you? Adrian searched her eyes. Probably. Aaliyah smiled softly. Then you're worrying about nothing. She leaned forward and kissed him gently. Not rushed, not cold. Just enough to quiet the question he had asked. But as she walked toward the bedroom afterward, Adrian remained standing in the living room for a moment longer. Something about the night felt unfinished. Something subtle he couldn't explain. The woman he loved was still standing beside him, still touching him, still smiling. Yet somehow, he felt like he was already losing her, and he had no idea why. Cole Global's annual shareholders summit was never a quiet event. The grand ballroom of the Midtown Financial Center shimmered with polished glass tables and tall projection screens displaying the company's global logistics network. Executives, investors, and media representatives filled the room. Soft conversations floated through the air as people took their seats. At the front of the stage stood Adrian Colethorn, confident, controlled, exactly as he had always been. He adjusted the microphone slightly. "Good afternoon." The room gradually quieted. Adrian glanced briefly across the audience before continuing. "As many of you know, the past year has been one of the most significant growth periods in Cole Global's history." Slides appeared behind him showing international shipping routes and expanding logistics hubs. "Our expansion strategy has positioned the company to enter new markets across Asia and Europe." Investors nodded while reviewing the numbers displayed on their tablets. Adrian continued calmly. "This next phase of growth will require decisive leadership and continued trust from all of you." His voice carried easily across the room, measured, professional. Nothing about the moment suggested the storm about to unfold. Near the back of the ballroom, Vanessa Clark sat among several invited guests. She leaned toward a colleague with a small smile. "He's good at this." The colleague nodded. "Cole Global has never looked stronger." Vanessa's eyes drifted briefly toward the stage. "Yeah." At that exact moment, the ballroom doors quietly opened. Aaliyah Hartwell stepped inside. Her expression remained calm, almost serene. The soft click of her heels against the marble floor went mostly unnoticed at first. But Adrian saw her immediately. His voice faltered for a split second. Then he recovered. But something about her presence felt deliberate. Aaliyah moved slowly toward the front of the room, not rushing, not hesitating, just walking with quiet certainty. Adrian continued speaking. "With the board's approval, we will begin implementing the next phase of our expansion plan within the next quarter." A moment, the voice came from the front row. Calm, clear. The room shifted slightly as people turned their heads. Aaliyah stepped forward. Adrian stared at her. "Aaliyah?" She looked toward the microphone. "Well, I believe there's something the shareholders should hear first." Murmurs moved across the room. Several board members exchanged confused glances. Adrian stepped slightly away from the podium. "What are you doing?" Aaliyah met his gaze evenly. "Clarifying something important." One of the board directors leaned toward the microphone. "Mrs. Colethorn, this presentation is scheduled." Aaliyah lifted a folder calmly. "Yes, and this concerns the same company you're all discussing." The director hesitated. Adrian's expression hardened slightly. "Aaliyah," but she had already reached the stage. The quiet confidence in her posture made several investors sit up straighter. Aaliyah turned toward the audience. "Good afternoon." Her voice carried easily across the room. Some investors recognized her immediately. Others whispered quietly. She opened the folder slowly. "I believe you're all discussing the future leadership and direction of Cole Global." A few heads nodded cautiously. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Where are you going with this?" Aaliyah finally looked at him. "Somewhere you didn't expect." She lifted the document slightly. "Over the past several months, a group of investors has quietly acquired a controlling block of shares in Cole Global." The room instantly filled with murmurs. One investor leaned forward. "Controlling shares?" Another voice whispered, "That's impossible." Aaliyah continued calmly. "The acquisition was finalized earlier this week." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "What investors?" Aaliyah smiled faintly. "Mine." The ballroom erupted. The room exploded with voices. Board members stood abruptly from their chairs. Investors began speaking over one another. "This can't be real. Who authorized this? How did we not know?" Aaliyah remained perfectly still at the podium. Adrian stared at her in stunned silence. "Aaliyah." His voice came out low. "What did you do?" She looked directly at him. "What you never expected me to." One of the board members grabbed the document from her hand. After scanning the first page, his expression changed instantly. "This is legitimate." More whispers spread through the room. Vanessa stood slowly from her seat near the back. "What?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Aaliyah's gaze drifted toward her. Just for a moment. "Hello, Vanessa." The entire room followed her line of sight. Vanessa froze where she stood. Adrian stepped closer to the podium. "This is a corporate meeting." Aaliyah nodded calmly. "Yes. And that's exactly why I chose this moment." She leaned slightly closer to the microphone. "Because business decisions should always be transparent." Then she looked at Adrian again. "Just like personal ones." The meaning behind the words landed slowly across the room. Adrian's eyes widened slightly. "Aaliyah." But she continued speaking. "Over the past months I have worked closely with several major investors who believe Cawthorn Global needs stronger leadership." Gasps echoed across the ballroom. Vanessa's face drained of color. "You're replacing him?" Aaliyah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she held Adrian's gaze for a long moment. "I'm correcting a mistake." The room fell into stunned silence. Adrian stared at her as if seeing a completely different person. "You planned this?" Aaliyah tilted her head slightly. "Well, some betrayals deserve careful planning." The words hung in the air. Sharp, unavoidable. Vanessa took a step backward. "Aaliyah." But Aaliyah's eyes never left Adrian. "Did you really think I would never find out?" Adrian's expression shifted from confusion to realization. The bedroom, the night she came home early. His voice lowered. "You knew." Aaliyah's smile was small, controlled. From the beginning, the ballroom erupted again with shocked voices. Vanessa covered her mouth. Humiliation burned across her face as hundreds of people turned toward her. Adrian stood completely still. For the first time in years, the man who controlled an empire looked utterly unprepared. And Aaliyah Hartwell, the woman he believed he understood, had just taken the most powerful seat in the room. The news spread across Manhattan within hours. Financial media covered the shareholder summit endlessly. Headlines flashed across business networks. Cawthorn Global leadership shaken. Major investor shift. CEO challenged publicly by his own wife. But the media never fully understood what truly happened that day. Because the real story was quieter. Months passed. Cawthorn Global continued operating, but the atmosphere inside the company had changed. Adrian still held a leadership role within the corporation, but the balance of power had shifted. Aaliyah Hartwell now held influence that even the board had to respect. And strangely, she rarely appeared at the headquarters anymore. Adrian sat alone in his office one evening reviewing financial reports. The room felt larger than usual, too quiet. He leaned back slowly in his chair. For months he had replayed the moment in the ballroom over and over again. The way Aaliyah stepped onto the stage, the calm certainty in her voice, the realization that she had known about the betrayal long before that day. Wow. The word escaped quietly, because Adrian had expected anger, screaming, confrontation. But Aaliyah had done something far more devastating. She had stayed calm, and in that calmness, she had taken everything back. Adrian stood and walked toward the window overlooking the city. "Well," he exhaled slowly, "I deserved that." But there was something else he had not expected, something far more uncomfortable than losing control of the company. He missed her. Not the power, not the partnership, her. And the realization came too late. Several months later, Adrian stood outside a quiet office building in Midtown Manhattan. He hesitated before stepping inside. The receptionist looked up as he approached. "Can I help you?" "Yes." He cleared his throat slightly. "I'm here to see Aaliyah Hartwell." The receptionist nodded. "She's expecting someone. Your name?" "Adrian." A brief pause followed. Then she gestured toward the hallway. "Her office is at the end." Adrian walked slowly down the corridor. The door stood slightly open. He knocked lightly. "Come in." Aaliyah sat behind her desk reviewing documents. When she looked up and saw him, her expression didn't change much. Adrian. He stepped inside. Hi. The room fell quiet. Neither spoke for a moment. Finally, Aaliyah closed the folder in front of her. Well, this is unexpected, Adrian nodded slowly. Yeah. I suppose it is. He stood across from the desk, hands loosely at his sides. No assistants, no board members, no power. Just two people who once believed they understood each other. Adrian spoke first. I didn't come here to argue. Aaliyah studied him quietly. That's good, because I'm not here for that either. He hesitated slightly. I came to say something I probably should have said a long time ago. Aaliyah leaned back in her chair. Go on. Adrian took a slow breath. I never expected to actually fall in love with you. The words hung in the air. Aaliyah didn't react immediately. Adrian continued. When we first met, he gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. I thought you were just another consultant challenging my company. Aaliyah raised an eyebrow slightly. That sounds familiar. He nodded. But somewhere along the way, his voice softened. You became the most important person in my life. A long pause followed. Adrian looked down briefly before continuing. And I ruined that. Aaliyah's expression remained calm. Yes. He nodded once. I know. For a moment neither spoke. Then Adrian said quietly, You were right to do what you did. Aaliyah tilted her head slightly. That's not something most people would admit. Well, he exhaled slowly. Losing you made something very clear. What? Adrian met her eyes. Love without trust. His voice trailed slightly. Doesn't survive. The room stayed silent for several seconds. Then Aaliyah nodded slowly. No, it doesn't. Adrian eventually stood to leave. I won't ask you to come back. Aaliyah watched him quietly. Why not? Because I know I don't deserve that. He walked toward the door. Before leaving, he paused. I am glad I met you. Aaliyah's voice stopped him. Adrian. He turned slightly. Yes. She looked at him calmly. You taught me something too. What? That loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself. Adrian nodded slowly. Fair enough. Then he left the office. The door closed quietly behind him. Aaliyah sat alone for a moment, looking out the window at the moving city below. Sometimes love begins with passion. Sometimes it grows into partnership. But without trust, even the strongest connections fall apart. And Aaliyah Hartwell had learned something powerful through it all. Self-respect must always come first. Now, let me ask you something. If you were in Aaliyah's position, after everything that happened, would you ever forgive Adrian? Or would you walk away the same way she did? Go ahead and share your thoughts in the comments. Stories like this remind us that life lessons often come from painful experiences. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure you subscribe to MZ Wink Stories for more powerful storytelling about love, betrayal, and the choices that shape our lives. Because sometimes, the quietest revenge is simply becoming stronger than the pain someone caused you. This story reminds us that self-respect must come before blind love. Betrayal reveals a person's true character. Revenge is most powerful when it is strategic, not emotional. Real strength comes from staying calm in moments of pain. And in the end, power doesn't belong to the loudest person in the room. It belongs to the one who stays composed when everything falls apart.